Before we jump into today's interview, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, High Beam Marketing. If you're a founder wearing every hat, then this ad's for you. You got a great product, the reviews are solid, and you even got people reordering from you. But for some reason, the growth you're expecting to happen is happening way slower than you need it to be. You tried running ads yourself online and it's mixed results. You tried hiring a cheap freelancer from Fiverr or Upwork and it was kind of meh. And then you take a big swing, you hire a fancy agency, and then all of a sudden you spend all this money just to get outsourced overseas or have somebody fresh out of college take over your account. And that just doesn't feel right. And that's usually where High Beam Marketing meets entrepreneurs just like you. We run your brand through a 200-point audit and show you exactly what's working and what's not. And suddenly you got clarity for the first time in your life. You got a plan and you got a partner who actually gives a damn about you and your business. And your job is just to focus on what you do best. And High Beam's job is to run profitable ads that scale your revenue. If you're tired of ad agencies giving you the runaround and you want to see if High Beam is the team that actually is different, book a discovery call today at highbeammarketing.com. Now let's get in today's episode. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Highlight, a business podcast for business people. And today I've got a very special friend on the show, a guy that I've known since my Ramsey Solution days. Yes, that Dave Ramsey, the big mega media guy. He's got a team of 1,000 people. And I think that's what people don't actually realize is that there's a bunch of really talented people that work on that brand and on the different brands they have there. And I get asked all the time, you know, what was the best part about working for Dave or working there or da-da-da. And I always say, across the board, I say it's the people that I got to meet and learn from and work with, because my story was I started at a barbecue restaurant where I did everything on my own. I had a very small team. It was like dishwashers and things like that. I was teaching myself marketing. But then I got to meet guys like my friend Charlie, who's going to be on the show today, and he is a copywriting expert. So if I had any question about copy, instead of me having to go to YouTube and that black hole or Twitter or LinkedIn and try to like piece together this information on my own, I had friends all of a sudden, coworkers that I could ping on Microsoft Teams and be like, hey, what do you think about this? How would you say this? What can you read this and tell me if it's bad or not? And that's what guys like Charlie did. And I'm so honored that he's now doing his own thing alongside High Beam. Charlie, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's good to be here. And you said it so well. The swath of expertise that we were surrounded by at Ramsey, we got spoiled because, a creative could walk across to a developer and say, how does this going to look in an app? And they would walk you through it just very easily to where, you didn't have to search the Google machine for anything. And you're exactly right. And now that we're out of, the Ramsey Solutions world, so many of those connections just continue to come back. Like every designer that I use is a Ramsey designer, or anybody I call for marketing or optimization, they are Ramsey people.
Yeah.
It really was a very special place and a very special time in our careers that I don't think we fully got to take advantage of.
Well, you never know in the moment. You're like, oh, I should probably get to know as many people as I possibly can, because this is a whole thing. But this podcast today is not about networking or relationship building or leadership or any of that. You are one of the best copywriters that I know. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show today, because, at High Beam, we work with a ton of different brands. They have different copy that they want to put in the ads. They want to use different scripts in the videos. They want to have different bodies on the emails or bodies in the actual ad copy itself. And like, there's this weird fractionalized, like everything just sort of doesn't flow together. And some of the things we do at High Beam is help people bring it all together by introducing to people like you. And you were kind enough to say, hey man, I got 5 tips that if people would follow these, they could probably get 80% of the way there and then hire an expert to actually bring them across the goal line. And so like, I'm appreciative of you doing that, but I'd love you to just jump right in and tell us like, what is copywriting tip number 1?
Copywriting tip number one is something that I think every marketer knows and every marketer uses as their banner or their mantra. It's to solve problems and match intent. If you are not doing that, especially in copy, then you're not going to win. Your product could be the greatest product in the world, but if it doesn't look, sound, and feel like a personality or a human and not a robot, you're not going to win. And more importantly, if it doesn't solve anybody's problem, then you're just not going to go anywhere. You might get a little bit of a boost every now and then with some fancy tricks and that sort of stuff, but it's also probably not the problems that you think you should be solving. For example, if you go to Amazon and you search for iPad, you're going to get how many different answers and results, right? But people don't realize, like, so many things have changed with the iPad. Like if I asked you when was the last time that Apple changed the cord and the charger for the iPad, would you even know? And so like that's one of the questions that somebody's going to be asking is, does this fit my particular model? Does this fit my camera, the button, the lack of button, whatever it is? So by the way, it was a generation 10 was when the iPad changed connectors. I'm just gonna close the loop there for everybody listening. Does it have an adapter or not? It's another one that people are asking because they did away with it with the iPhone for a while, but not the iPad. The iPad still comes with one. So a customer is going to be looking for the answers to those questions. And in your product description, even in a bullet pointed list or something at the bottom, they're going to want to know what generation is it, what year is it, all of that stuff. Most people don't know that the best way to find that out is to go to your customer success people, your customer service people, mine your emails, look at your reviews, see how your customers are actually talking about things. That's
Mm,
what's going to help you figure out, am I actually solving their problems? If we
mm.
get the same question 20 times in a week, we're not solving problems. So let's just get ahead of the curve and put that on a product, a product page, a product description, an FAQ, wherever it is. Make it easy for people to find. Because what your customers say is what's true. I heard a great phrase, by the way, that I may have mentioned to you in the past, but I heard somebody say recently, "You can't read the label when you're inside the jar."
Mm.
And so many customers are looking at our stuff and going, that doesn't make sense, or what about this? And we're just kind of answering it without thinking, oh, let's go ahead and get in front of that train and make sure we take care of it on the front end.
Yeah, that's a marketing problem in general where you have so much institutional knowledge about the thing that your brain fills in a lot of gaps when you're reading a piece of copy that you've written. You're like, of course this makes sense. If you knew everything I knew, this would make a ton of sense to you. But then all of a sudden you get somebody in that reads it that doesn't really know a lot about your business and they go, "Oh, hey, this isn't I have no idea what this is," right? And you're like arguing with them almost. I've seen that where they're like, "How do you not know what this is?" And you're like, they don't spend every single day thinking about your business like you do. They're going to spend, if you're lucky, 2 to 5 minutes. And so you have I love this advice, especially being number one, because you're so passionate about the product. You may want to include all of it or everything or go really deep or really wide. Like what you've got to do is find out what is the core problem like you're talking about here and like actually make sure you're matching that intent. My favorite story from the Ramsey days that the copywriting team there used to tell us all was they used to do keyword planning for blogs and they were thinking about writing a blog on future net worth. And so everybody got really excited about it because that's a huge keyword. That's a big, like, yeah, everybody wants to know, like, how do you build wealth? Like, what are you going to be worth in the future? Da, da, da. And then one person threw their hand up and said, like, hey, is anybody like actually search that to see what comes up? Because I just did. And basically the whole first page of Google is trying to figure out what the wrapper future is actually worth. And so had we
Yep.
written that blog, it'd have been a huge waste of time because you'd have just been buried under everybody's curiosity of the wrapper
Hmm.
future's net worth. And so it's a good
Absolutely.
example of like, even if you have good intentions of trying to match what you think intention is, the market may have already uh, taken that and put it somewhere else. So I love
Yep.
that. Do you have like a customer that you've worked with or any experience where it's like, it really stood out to you of like a huge mismatch problem, even beyond the Apple thing?
Oh, absolutely. I worked with a client not too long ago who they're essentially the face of the business. Their name is in the business. And when I did my initial content audit for them, I looked at everything, including how many words were on their homepage. It would shock you to learn how many words were actually on that homepage. I'm not going to say it was 1,500. It was a lot. The average
An
is like
essay.
3 to 500. Yeah, it was messy. But the thing that was most interesting was this particular client tried to in their headline sound very academic, very high level, regardless of who their target customer was. Their target customer was parents of teenagers.
Mm.
Teenagers were the actual recipient of this product, but parents were the ones who were purchasing it for their child. And I just called it out and said, why did you choose this particular headline? Oh, well, that's what I did my research study on in college. I'm like, that doesn't matter. you're not solving any problems by touting your resume and saying you know all of this stuff. The way you're going to win is to say, this is what you're going to get. This is the benefit. And maybe sometimes, anytime I get to the end of it and I feel like it's incomplete, I'll always tack on so that, like, what's the result that we're actually driving towards? And that will usually unlock the piece that's missing to it as well. And when we went through that exercise together, it wound up being a total unlock to say, this is who it's for, this is what it does, and this is the result that you are going to achieve over time. I see that with a lot of clients, if I'm being honest, where they think something that's clever or something that's trendy or something that's current has to be the thing that is front facing. And I'm like, simplicity and clarity wins every single time. And
Hmm.
yeah, those things have their time and have their place, but if you can do the very basic things really well, you're going to win.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Well, what about tip number two?
Tip number two, be mindful of your platform. It sounds obvious, but I mean, everybody knows that you can't just say the same thing everywhere, right? Even in my own personal brand, I talk very differently or I write very differently on LinkedIn than I will to a client in an email or that I will on my actual web copy or my website. And I think the struggle for a lot of content creators, especially a lot of writers, is I have a new platform, so I have to do something new. And I believe that's true in certain pieces. Um, when you put a product on your homepage, you do have to be mindful of all the traditional things, marketing, SEO, and ranking, and your own content optimization. But then when you go to Amazon, their algorithm is going to treat it very differently than a traditional Google crawler or anything like that would. So you just have to be mindful of what are the new rules that I have to play with on a particular platform. How can I be mindful of their best practices, not just my best practices, and adhere to my brand standards to make sure that we're being competitive in every single space that we're at. So it's a short, sweet, and simple one. But I mean, a lot of people just think, oh, we can just do the same thing everywhere. But that's not always true.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because basically before TikTok there was this idea that you acted a certain way on Facebook versus LinkedIn versus Instagram versus Snapchat and your website and your blog. Like there was a wide gap in differentiation of voices. And then something happened when TikTok rolled out an interest-based algorithm where all of a sudden it's like we're only going to show you things you're interested in. And so if you like dogs, the feed is going to be filled with dogs. To your point, you do want to talk about the thing you do. I agree with that. And what you want to do is try to match that platform. So like TikTok's voice now, it's a little bit younger skewed demographically. It's a little more like I'm trying to think sarcastically kind of angry sarcasm is kind of the
Hmm.
vibe there. Not too different than Twitter, but Twitter's more of like jerk in your face, and more bold and direct, right? And LinkedIn is still a little bit more like those, like whatever your personality style is, it's like, but it's still professionalism. And so, yeah, where we see on the advertising side is that if you have the budget to be able to change the copy for the creative on each one of those platforms, it will help the thing work better.
Hmm.
I will be interested to see if this advice holds up 5 years from now as like the TikTokification of these platforms happens, because I've seen more and more homogenization of like it's basically all the same social media experience where 3 years ago it was totally different. Where I think you're right is like knowing like what does your personal brand sound like? And if you're making content as a personal brand founder, and I'd love to know what you think about this, like versus like as a company voice, because there's not always there may be overlap, but they're not the same thing. And I think sometimes people get in trouble with that, right?
Yeah, and I ask clients this pretty regularly, especially solopreneurs, consultants, and coaches. Do you want to be the brand or do you want the brand to be the brand? Because the answer to that is going to change everything. John Acuff is a great example. John Acuff is the brand, and he does all kinds of stuff with speaking and books and workshops and professional development and personal development. But he's just decided, like, I am the brand, right? Versus something like Mint Mobile, which I'm going to reference here in just a minute too, which is basically said we want Ryan Reynolds to be the face of the brand, but we are still a low cost cell phone provider and service provider in the space. And so there's nothing wrong with having I won't say different personalities, but there's nothing wrong with your brand taking on a personality that is separate from maybe the writer itself, or um, the founder who feels like they have to be the face of the company, right? And so I ask clients all the time, if you were going to have a celebrity spokesperson, who would they be? How
Mm,
would they sound in this particular space? And just write like that. That's
mm,
okay. You don't have to necessarily be Charlie in the marketplace. I can have a very different look, tone, and feel to the way that my copy is coming across to prospective clients and current clients and all of that. So, and I think you're right. TikTok has kind of ushered in this new era of personalization and in a way customization. However their algorithm truly works is going to be a mystery to us, I think, for a very, very long time. But to your point, the more stuff that you want to see, you will see. And so TikTok is a great example of if you want to be in front of 40 something moms, maybe it's a little bit easier to do that if you know how to leverage the message correctly versus something like Amazon, where it is so broad and you have to be very specific and you have to start to niche down a little bit and be a little bit more selective in how you're writing and what you're saying.
mm. All right, man. What about number three?
Don't settle, test and optimize. Going back to our Ramsey days, when I worked on one particular brand there, we ran a 9 variant test on a headline. From that 9 variant test, we picked the top three. We ran another test of those top three. And before we did any of that, we had to test to even get to the original nine from a bank of about 30. And you know which one won? It was the one that in a blind study would have ranked number three.
Mm,
So, I mean, we took a long, long time. It probably took 3 weeks to run that full test because we were measuring a very specific kind of conversion event. But we would have not picked the winner eventually if we would have just said, "Oh yeah, that's the one we like," or "That's the one we think matches our customer intent," without putting it in the marketplace. So if you've got something that works as far as copy and content goes, fantastic. Like, keep going with that. But don't be afraid to refresh your creative. If you can A B test, especially in the email land, please A B test as much as you possibly can. Put different subjects in there. Put one that is very transactional and one that is very emotional. Change the time of day that you send it. Change your delay sends, all of that. Um, the more that you can test and optimize, the more you'll discover about what your customers actually respond to. I know some companies are, they get so granular as to say, did we do all lowercase or do we do, traditional sentence case or caps case? And now they do the one that won because they saw a higher open rate. I'm not a big fan of emojis just in my personal life, but putting emojis in subject lines really does work, especially around the holidays.
mm.
Put a little Christmas tree and a little Santa Claus in there, and your open rates are probably going to go up. Somebody decided at some point you got to test that thing. So please continue to test and optimize your copy and your content, especially in your ecom space, because if you're running a seasonal campaign, it really matters because when people come back for your evergreen stuff, all the stuff that just exists outside of that campaign, well, now you have to be mindful of, we don't want it to be such a jarring experience
Mm.
that people bail because it was just a chasm created between what they saw first and what they saw afterwards.
I think it was in Jim Collins' book, Great by Choice, that he talks about truly great 10x companies was the example in that book are spending up to 10% of their revenue on R&D projects. And there was something about that ratio of like, hey, we drive the business forward consistently with 90% of what we know is going to work and what we know works. We are okay with wasting 10% or investing 10% is probably a better way to say that of our revenue on trying new things and seeing what happens. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say with this copy stuff. It's like, hey, you know the brand voice that's gotten to you to where you're at now from a revenue standpoint. Don't be afraid to try some different things with 10 to 20% of your copy. And then you never know, like most of it will probably be a dud and be okay with that. Like go in with like, I'm trying to make this not work and have that expectation as like, that is what winning looks like is like, this doesn't work. Because what ends up happening every single time is like in that 10% in ROD, that's the next thing that drives you forward. And all of a sudden, 6 months from now, that is the new way you guys write copy. And then you're testing
Yep.
something new to drive the ball forward. And it's because people change, markets change, humans, grow. Your customers are different every 6 months. You have people come in, they have churn, yada yada. So like you're constantly moving versus like stagnating and getting stale. I really love that.
Hmm. Have you ever heard the story about 3M? So 3M used to allocate a certain amount of time to each of their employees to just mess around, to
Mm.
really do some R&D. Their top selling product came out of that exercise. So now anytime you see a post-it note, you ought to know that that came from somebody just milling around and going, is there some kind of like temporary glue tape thing that I could use that just is good for once or maybe twice, and then we could throw away? That's how that product came about.
Yeah.
So I mean, you never know what might be um, at the bottom of just milling around, toying around, testing, optimizing, doing customer research, all of those things.
Yeah, I think it was Google that famously had a similar example where it's like one of the founders, maybe Sergey Brin of Google, went in and like pinned a screenshot of Google Ads early iteration of that project to a cork board in the break room there at Google, and he circled it in big red, ink, and he said, "This sucks." And then he walked out, and some engineer came in and was just eating his snack and was looking at it, and then like sort of took it down, went back, fixed the whole thing. Just over a weekend, he just got bit by the bug, went and fixed it, and then delivered what pretty much is Google Ads today over a weekend. And he wasn't even working on that problem. He just happened to see it. And like they had given their company employees freeway to go do that and spend some of their time on that. So, yeah, I think you as a leader of an organization, or if you're the one actually doing the work, or if you're working with a copywriter like Charlie, like encourage them, like you're talking about here, like, hey, test different things. I think we get scared sometimes. Like we're in the early days, we're just looking for fit and we're okay with trying a bunch of things and seeing what sticks. But once we get stuff to start sticking, we don't want to go back to the pre-stick days. And so we almost
Hmm.
overcorrect back the other way where we're not going to change anything and we're trying to
Yep.
maintain the status quo. And like, it's just, there is no such thing as the status quo. It is always changing. So you better chase it.
Copywriters, by the way, are notorious perfectionists, and I had to learn this very early on in my career that I was always trying to deliver the perfect thing, but the places that I found the most success, believe it or not, was when somebody said, "Give me 20 ideas without even thinking, go."
Mm-hmm.
And I could get out of my own head for a second and explore some of the possibilities rather than having to get these 6 words absolutely perfect. So
Yeah.
if you need to give your copywriters permission, your content team permission to just throw stuff up on the wall and see what happens, do that every now and then. They'll appreciate it a lot because I promise you they'll sleep better at night. But you'll also be amazed at some of the stuff that comes out of that place too.
Yeah. 100%. All right. What about number 4?
Number 4, levity is your best friend. If it sounds like a robot, people are going to check out. And we could go on and on and on about how people are utilizing, certain tools that are out there today in the wrong way. And I'm not against anything, with AI or all of that. I use it on a regular basis, but I will not just put that out into the wild without having some kind of human filter to it. But anywhere that you can add some levity to your brand, to your voice, meaning that you're not taking yourself too seriously and you can make your customers smile, you can make them snicker, or at the bare minimum, just pay attention. Do that as much as possible because the brands that are skyrocketing right now are the ones who are doing that. And even the ones who have done it over the last few years. Look at Liquid Death, for example. It's the most ridiculous concept in the world, and yet they 10x'd over a year. They went from 70 million to 700 million in 1 year because they ran these outrageous campaigns and just went full send into this brand persona that they created for themselves. Jeremy's Razors is another great example of that, where they had this ridiculous, flame throwing, Ferrari driving campaign, and now they're in the second, almost their third iteration of their product, right? Mint Mobile, which I mentioned a minute ago, they leverage Ryan Reynolds' humor every single time. To the point where they ran a campaign and said, "Hey, everybody, inflation, and here we're here to announce that we're cutting our prices." Wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
We're cutting our prices, and they're still standing tall as a company. But look at the things that we share on the internet right now. We share the funny stuff. Yes, there's serious stuff, and we have to stay informed and all that sort of stuff. But most of the time, we're sharing. Look at this funny ad. Look at this funny clip. Look at this. Look at this thing that made me laugh or stop or just pay attention for a second. And I said this a minute ago. One of the greatest ways that you can help out a copywriter, especially somebody who just feels stuck, is to say, who is the personality, who is the celebrity, who is the endorser that you would want at the front of this brand? How would they say this tagline? How would they write this email? Then you can think a little bit differently about rhythm and cadence and vocab and all of
Mm,
those really technical grammar things. But it will also get your brand to sound more human. And
mm.
especially in an e-com space where you have to cut through the noise, that's the kind of stuff that will get you more traction and more momentum.
Yeah, I love that. I tell people all the time when they're sending us creative for digital ads at Highbeam, they send us these ads and they're flat. And what I mean by flat is not a subjective design experience or something like that. What do I like? What I mean by flat is when I look at this, it causes zero emotion in me. And humor is one of the big emotions, right? And I love it because it's one of the most positive emotions. Four of the six emotions are negative. And so humor is one of the only positive ones. And so I love the idea of like focusing on that because it's so easy to go with the negative stuff. And it is I think it's safe to just go with non-emotional things. You're like, this is not going to get me in trouble. This is not going to be dangerous. Nobody's going to comment negatively on this. But like, here's the thing: if it doesn't spur an emotion, nobody's going to remember it. There's this famous study where this guy loses his ability to feel any sort of emotion, and I think he had like a brain accident or something like that. And basically, this man had the same level of IQ, so he didn't lose any intelligence, but all of a sudden his life fell apart. And it's because he stopped being able to feel emotion. And that's what drives our decision making process. And so if you create levity like you're talking about here, all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, I can see what they're trying to do here. I can see this ad that I would normally just ignore. And now all of a sudden, let me click on it, or let me read this email, or let me read this landing page. I love that. So
So I'll brag on myself for half a second. When I worked on a particular brand that you'd be familiar with, that's in the personal budgeting space, we were trying to refresh some of the creative. And at the time, I believe the headline was, the best way to budget or the easiest way to budget or, budget the Ramsey way or something like that. And we ran, in my opinion, one of the most successful campaigns, and we had the data to show it, I guess. But we ran a campaign that said budgeting that doesn't suck,
mm,
and it got people's attention, number one. But if you think about it at its core, money is a very personal thing. When you talk about money and relationships, two of the most emotional things that you will deal with in this life, and you call out some of that nuance, like, I don't want to budget. Well, that's budgeting that doesn't suck. Well, tell me more about that thing. It got us a lot of signups and a lot of free accounts because people just kind of stopped and went, I want that thing. And had we just said the best way to budget, anybody can say that. But we chose to pivot a little bit and say, now let's get in their face for a second and say, you're actually going to enjoy this, believe it or
mm,
not, when you flip it
yeah.
around.
Yeah, and that worked because it matched their brand tone, right? And that's why you can't go too far about it outside of who you are as a brand. And the Liquid Death example you gave a minute ago is perfect for that. They know who they are as a jester brand. They make jokes. They do all kind of funny things. Like that is who they are as a brand archetype. They did a collaboration with Yeti. I don't know if you saw this, where they co-branded a coffin, and they were basically putting drinks inside of a coffin, and it was Liquid Death in a coffin, a Yeti branded cooler coffin. And everybody in the comment section essentially is saying, this is hilarious. Liquid Death is so funny. Nobody's talking about Yeti. And if they do talk about Yeti, they're saying a lot of negative things like, oh, why is Yeti doing this? Like, are they trying to kill me? Like, what is this? And it's because they triggered the wrong it's not that they couldn't be funny, it's that they used the wrong emotion in the wrong context. And so what I mean by that is, like, if you look at Yeti as a brand archetype of the explorer, that's all about living and exploring and going out and seeing and doing. And now all of a sudden they're going, hey, you're dying. And it's like, well, that's, I think we're all aware of that.
Yeah.
But I didn't need you and your brand to point it out. Like Liquid Death is like laughing in the face of it. Sure, that matches. Like it was like exploring death. Maybe that would work, but like laughing in the face of death, like it didn't. It just didn't land for them. And so, it's not a one size fits all thing. And I don't think you're saying that. I do think you have to be careful with it no matter what. So that's good stuff. What about tip 5, man?
Last one. Let's bring it home. Just always remember, especially from a copy standpoint, it is not over after checkout. E-commerce brands, we're all focused on sales, and they should be, rightfully so. But don't miss the opportunity after checkout. I ordered a product earlier this year, and when it got to my door, I was thrilled because it's what I wanted and all of that stuff. But I opened the box and I realized they had printed a message inside the box, not just like a catchphrase, but it looked like a letter. I mean, those things aren't cheap to to produce. But here's what it said. One of the best lines in it said this: "Let me also remind you that the receipt of this package creates an utterly non-binding and unenforceable obligation to purchase exclusively from our company from here on out. I'm sure you'd happily oblige because we all know those other bums treat your wallet like a pinata to be whacked nonstop."
That's funny.
What a cool win right there for somebody to go, nobody cares about the bottom of this package, but let's just put something in there to catch their attention and show we're not taking ourselves too seriously and we care about the next purchase that you're going to make. The two
Mhm.
highest intent things that people can do on the internet today are give you their email or give you their phone number. And if a customer is willing to do that, yes, they have to for some, some checkout purchases and flows. But if they're willing to do that, they're saying, I give you permission to give me information. And
Mm.
so don't take that opportunity lightly. I signed up for two different SMS marketing things last year, not just because they gave me 10% off, but because they were products that I was genuinely interested in. And now every time I get a text message from those brands, I open it. Liquid Death is one of them. Uh, I get a product announcement before anybody else does because that's the first place that they typically send stuff out. Yes, I wanted the $6,000 Liquid Death branded ice bath, but no, we couldn't do that because we have a family and it's not a smart purchase. But I found out about it because I said, you have my permission to give me that information. If your brand misses these opportunities to nurture those relationships after, you're going to sink your own ship, unfortunately. And this is where I tell clients all the time consistency is key here.
Mhm.
Your thank you email should sound like your product page, which should sound like your social media, which should sound like your newsletter, which should sound like your website, and so on and so forth. Like everything is connected. And if you can find those opportunities to nurture somebody along, even if they purchase from you one other time or never again, you have still made the kind of impression that you were trying to make with that brand personality. Now, again, you can't be all things to all people all the time, but you can be the same in every single facet of your customer journey and the things that you can control. And if you're not, you're going to lose. So keep in mind, like everything that happens after checkout is continuing that relationship. And the more consistent that you can be, the more places you can find those opportunities to nurture them along, the more likely they are to come back and purchase from you again.
Mm. I love that, man. This is a good list. I feel like I've got a lot of homework just to do for high beam marketing right now. So I gotta I gotta end the show. But before we let you go, man, you've been so generous with your time. Like this has been amazing. So much great information. Like we always like to let the guest have a big ask at the end. How can we serve you? What can we do to help you out, man?
Yeah, you can always go to my website. It's clarityovereverything.com, or find me on LinkedIn. It's Charlie Sells, Sells, which, I should have been in sales my whole life, but I spent a lot of time avoiding it because I like to be creative and not salesy. But anyways, I have a litany of things that could be available to anybody who needs them. Content audits. I do some like 1 day workshops as well that help people kind of untangle everything that's in their heads, get it out on the table, and then come up with a 1 to 2 month roadmap and then a 3 to 12 month roadmap after that. And I still do all the typical copywriting things from editing to ideation to content strategy to SEO and everything in between.
I love it. You're a pro. We've worked with you on a bunch of different projects for different clients, and it's always gone really well. So I can't recommend you enough. That's the high
Oh,
beam
thank you.
stamp of approval. So for whatever that's
And
worth, it's worth what you paid.
vice versa. I send clients your way all the time too.
It's funny when business is so personal. I hate the saying it's business not personal. Business is personal. You do business with people you know, like, and trust. And I know, like, and trust Charlie. So if you need copywriting help, definitely go to clarityovereverything.com. We'll put it at the link in the show notes to all of your stuff, your LinkedIn, your website, everything. Charlie, man, thanks for joining me today. Thank you to everybody out there listening. We will see you next week.